Welcome to Fintech Insider Focus. I'm Rachel Pandyan, product lead here at 11FS. In this series, in collaboration with Visa, we are shining a light on fintech trends in different parts of the world. This is the last episode in our current series and concludes our journey around different industry niches and regions in Europe. In this final episode, we are looking at payments and the role AI could play in fighting financial crime and fraud, particularly in real-time payments. However, as payments speed up, so too do the fraudsters. And could AI play a role in helping fin crime as much as fighting it? And what can the industry do to stay ahead? As this is Focus, we are training our lens on a particular region to have this discussion. And if you're looking for the leader in digital payments in Europe, look no further than Scandinavia. This is a region that has been at the forefront of payments innovation and cashless technology for many years and leads the way in Europe. So what better place to center our discussion today? To have this conversation, I'm delighted to be joined by a panel of fantastic guests with expertise in this space and from two companies based in the Scandinavian region. David Capezza, VP, Head of Risk Advisory Europe, Visa. Welcome to the show, David. How are you doing today?
Firstly, it's certainly exciting to be here. I appreciate the opportunity to have the conversation today. I think on two really timely topics, really certainly top of mind to everyone across the region and globally: artificial intelligence, and then on the payments side, real-time payments and faster payments. Excited to have the conversation. Look forward to the questions. Again, as you noted, I lead Europe Risk Advisory for Visa. I'm based in London, but I have a team and a structure that's throughout the region, domiciled in each of the different markets that Visa operates in across Europe. And then, of course, we work closely with both Monica and Silke across the region in Scandinavia, and look forward to not only talking about where we are today, but also certainly where we're going in the future from an overall payments and technology perspective. So thanks for having me.
No, for sure. And I definitely think we've got the right people in the room to talk about some exciting futures for payments. So alongside David and myself, I'm so pleased to be joined by our very special guests. Firstly, Silke Urfeby, Chief Risk and Compliance Officer at Vipps. Welcome to Fintech Insider Focus. Can you tell us a bit more about yourself, Vipps, and your role?
Sure. Thank you for having us. So thanks for the invite. Really interesting topic. So it was so interesting that I actually skipped a vacation day to be here. So that's really good.
We're
I'm looking forward
honored.
to that. So, yeah. So who's Vipps Mobile Pay? We are a digital wallet solution, born as Vipps in Norway and as Mobile Pay in Denmark and Finland. And both companies were founded with the same idea: sending a payment as easy, fast, and frictionless as sending an SMS. In 2023, we joined forces. So now we are one Nordic company, and we are connecting now 12 million users, well, almost 11.5, but growing. 450,000 merchants and having billions of payments, a very big share of them real-time payments every year. And my role, I would describe myself as the balance finder in Vipps Mobile Pay. So finding the risk-reward balance, finding the balance between simplicity and compliance, between user-friendliness and frictionlessness and security and so on. I also have a very boring title, as you've mentioned, and that's Chief Risk and Compliance Officer.
I personally think compliance is at the heart of innovation. So I think you're going to have lots to say, because it is definitely all about that risk and reward. So excited to hear from you today. And last but by no means least, it's a warm welcome to Fintech Insider for Monica Likama, co-CEO at Infuse. Thank you for joining us. Please tell us a little bit about yourself and Infuse as well.
Thank you so much for having me. I have many titles. I'm the co-founder, co-CEO, chair, whatever you need, I'll be that one. So I'm an old banker myself, and before that I was in the telco industry. And 8 years ago, I decided that the world needed and deserved a better issuer processor, especially in the Nordics, and then of course Europe and globally, and hence decided to do something about it and founded Infuse with my co-founder Denise. And we've been on the journey of enabling issuers to issue different products on the card rails. And we are currently also now an EMI ourselves, both in Europe and in UK. And we are directly connected to both the networks, so Visa and MasterCard. So we do a lot of different kind of use cases, both consumer products and corporate products. We have B2B, B2C cards, and we do digital wallets, etc. And also very focused on a couple of key verticals, especially helping the fuel industry transforming to EV. So we do a lot of in fleet, we do a lot in expense management, also employee benefits enablement, then of course in credit and lending, and then also enabling banks to issue faster, better products to their customers, whether they are consumers or corporates. And then on top of this, we also are very proud of enabling different kind of disbursement and refugee programs throughout Europe because of the problem that we have now with Russia attacking Ukraine. We have a lot of refugees, and also, for example, the Finnish State Treasury is issuing all of their disbursements cards through us. So a variety of capability, 17 million end customers doing payments on a daily basis through our platform, and we were also the first one to put it in a public cloud. So a lot of first ones, and of course, one of our key topics is ESG, and in the ESG, really fighting fraud. So the social aspect is really important. So fighting fraud, terrorist financing, money laundering, and human trafficking, which are all very urgent problems in Europe and in UK due to multiple factors. So very happy to be here to discuss about what we do today and what we can do tomorrow, and especially we have a very tight collaboration with Visa, so happy to be here. And of course, being Nordic and Finnish, happy to be with Silke. Do you identify as a Norwegian or a Dane?
Well, I identify as a German who ended up 20 years ago in Norway and never found my way out again.
Okay, so you are married to a Norwegian. That's an interesting combo, German-Norwegian. Let's dive into that a little bit later.
Maybe if we have time.
But thank you for having me here.
No, thank you so much for being here. And it definitely sounds like Infuse are at the forefront of a lot of innovation across multiple different verticals. So thrilled to have you and super excited to dive into the topic today. Before we dive in, just as a reminder, listeners, that the views or opinions of our panel are their own and don't necessarily reflect those of the companies they are representing. And as always, nothing we say should be taken as tax, financial, or legal advice. Please, 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 please do your own research, but listen along because I'm sure there are going to be some interesting tidbits in here today. So let's start from the top. David, can you kick us off, please? Let's start with the Visa position as leaders in the payment space. Why is the real-time payment space in Europe so exciting, and why is it making headlines right now?
So, firstly, it's an exciting space to be in right now. I mean, as you just heard from Monica, across the region, what we're seeing is a big focus on just money movement solutions writ large. So, remove card payments, remove digital payments, just money movement in general. So whether it's B2B flows, whether it's fleet, whether it's card payments, push payments, pull payments, all of the above, customers and consumers are driving this initiative, and they're really, you're seeing it from a customer base. There's a demand for faster payments. There's demand for faster clearing. There's demand for faster capabilities to move money, whether you're a merchant moving money to a merchant or you're looking at disbursement payments. There's really a need to have faster rails across the board. So at Visa, really one of the big focus areas right now is extending all capabilities across multiple rails. And so when we think about this, again, I'm from the risk side of the business. So on the risk side of the business, how do you reduce the riskiness of things like faster payments, real-time payments, payer sending money to payee, determining the risk factors in that, and how do you do that in real time? And I think we'll dedicate some time of today's discussion around that. So while the business itself is looking at broadly money movement solutions, not only within Europe, but globally, and ensuring that those rails are available. Visa Direct, 8.5 billion endpoints, whether it's wallet endpoints, customers, cards. We're really looking at scaling that space. On the risk side, a lot of what we'll focus on today is on the artificial intelligence in particular. How do you identify anomalies? How do you do so in real time? So how do you create global scalable artificial intelligence capabilities that can provide scoring and informed decisioning in real time, both for the sending and recipient, whether it's a cardholder, a customer, whether it's a account to account payment, or whether it's a B2B payment. So how do you ensure that that decision can be taken at the moment of that transaction? So that's a big focus that we have across the risk space now in Europe. And I'm happy to talk about some of the things we're considering and developing and deploying in the AI account-to-account space for actually fraud detection and mitigation. But we can take that on later.
Yeah, for sure. And I guess AI has really blown up. I know there's also been a lot of payments innovation, but it's definitely felt like there's been an acceleration as there's been a wider adoption of AI. Have there been any significant changes in the recent years or months in this space that you think has really marked a shift or a tipping point one way or the other?
Yeah, I think there's been a number of parts of the evolution. So beyond consumers really looking for various ways to pay and be paid in a safe, secure, faster, immediate, instant way. The other thing that we've seen is the evolution and advancement of non-traditional payment flows, obviously the advancement of wallets, and I'm sure we're going to talk a lot about that with some of the experts on the line today. From an overall processing perspective, making sure that you're providing those open rails, whether it's across open banking, and ensuring that you're securing those API connections, particularly when you're thinking about open banking. But from a consumer perspective, there's also both on the merchant side, the business side, as well as the consumer side. You're looking for, or what we're seeing is more customer demand for specialized consumer experiences. So whether it's the merchant providing more bespoke experiences to the consumer when they enter a digital merchant space, or even in a card present brick and mortar traditional space, you're having a more bespoke experience where really the payment itself is almost secondary to the overall experience. And in fact, indeed, is secondary to the customer experience. Really, the primary focus is how do they ensure that they're able to pay or be paid to disperse or receive disbursement in a way that the payment itself is almost invisible to the consumer. And so artificial intelligence is informing a lot of that decisioning. So not only preferences, but experiences, and ensuring that it's as instant, seamless, and frictionless as possible.
Yeah. And speaking of frictionless, Silke, I loved at the start when you described the goal of VIPs as trying to make payments as frictionless or as easy as sending an SMS. So in your eyes, how would you describe the current landscape of real-time payments in Europe, or specifically Scandinavia?
In Scandinavia, it's basically a given. We have been living in this real-time world since at least 2018, I would say. I mean, in Norway, we have VIPs. In Sweden, they have Swish. In Denmark, we have MobilePay. In Finland, it's a little bit more fragmented, but MobilePay also playing a role there. And it's simply expected by the customer. It's nothing they're willing to pay for. But it's something that is expected. And if you don't deliver real time, and the customer, the end user, they don't care what rails you're using. If it's account to account or card to card, they couldn't care less. They only want to know that when I send money, it's supposed to be within seconds at the receiver. And that also goes for us now as we are Nordic across borders. So if I whips money for a beer to my Danish colleague, I expect that my Danish colleague gets the money within seconds, not within days. So this is really from our side, it's a customer demand, which we then, as David says, simply have to adapt to make sure, to make it as secure, not only easy, but also as secure as possible. Our big advantage is that VIP's MobilePay is like one gigantic closed loop embracing all our 12 million customers and 450,000 merchants. That means we always know the endpoints. I know who is sending money to who. Both are ID verified. I know which receiving account they have, which banking connections they're using. So that makes my life a lot easier than someone who is, for example, providing anonymous real-time payments. As a risk manager, I'm a little bit, I can do it, but I technically don't have to do it.
Yeah, for sure. And, you've nicely led on to my next question. Scandinavia has always been at the forefront of payments innovation and cashless technology. Monica, I'd love to hear from you. Do you think that leaves the region more or less vulnerable to fraud, especially as payments processing is sped up to basically real-time cross-border here?
It's a good question, and it's a hard one to answer, just because we've been the first internet bank was actually built in Finland in the 90s. So we've been in the let's say the the faster payments and real time for a very, very long time. I think like mobile pay maybe 2018, but in reality, through across the Nordics, we had real time more or less before SEPA Direct came. So for us, it was like SEPA Direct, that's so lame because we had it already, which of course becomes like we are a bit too used to having it. But I think one of the biggest strengths that we have is also we have a very strong way of becoming onboarded. As in all of the Nordic countries, the banks are the vehicle for assigning a digital identity. And I think that's one of the big challenges. Like, how do you become KYC'd? Like, know your customer, do the strong authentication, and then strongly authenticate every transaction. So that means that we are in the forefront. We are very well protected until we're not, because we also think we know it so well that we are much more let's say hit with different kind of phishing schemes and these kind of fake identity schemes. And I think those are more the scams that are a problem from a risk perspective. And also, of course, in the world we live in currently with the geopolitical situation, all these NATO memberships, etc. Now all of the Nordic countries are NATO members, but that has only become just recent. So there's a lot of challenges which of course impact payments. And the faster the payment is, the less time you have to protect it.
Yeah, it's really tough. And as well, like as we try to open up payments to, you made a really good use case, Monica, around when people are displaced and they're coming to a new country and you're trying to set them up with all the banking services that they need to ensure they have access to service, and you relax some rules, but then people can really take advantage of those. So Silke, putting your risk and compliance hat on, what do you see those big risks as, and where do you see opportunities for us to step in or to leverage technologies like AI?
As Monica says, KYC is a really important topic, and using AI also to make these processes especially even more frictionless, getting as much data as possible from public registers, using the EID, because the Nordics and Scandinavia, we are not only advanced in the payment space, but also in the EID space. I mean, no one would come get the idea to sign a loan agreement, maybe AD or female, but usually everyone is signing everything with EID, right? So using this technology, but connecting it to more intelligence, to more automated decision-making, to figure out where do I have to use manual, where do I have to use human experience, this stomach feeling and everything, and where can I just roll out the red UX carpet and lead the customer right into, open all the doors and welcome them, because most likely everything is okay. The other thing is that we have to adapt so quickly now. I mean, in the olden days, and that's like now 2 years in the payment space, broker fraud was a major problem in Norway and Denmark as well. Fake identities, as you said, Monica. Right now, our main problem is, it has many names, safe account scams, imposter fraud, social media fraud, whatever you call it, but fraudsters using either really good investigation or more and more also AI to persuade the victim to authenticate the payments themselves. That means everything we learned before, like detecting a device change. That's most likely phishing. Stop the payment. Forget it. There is no device change. There is the user is home, sitting in their home in Oslo, their normal IP address, their normal phone number, nothing strange. Just decided now, because a fraudster persuaded them to transfer 10,000 kroner to someone they never heard about before. And on the other side, very often is sitting a mule, which is also bad, because that's also not ID fraud or fake identity, but someone who is stupid enough to lend their identity to fraudsters to just get the money further out. So it's the layering, but also how fast they learn. So the moment we lean back and think we have understood how the fraudsters work, we are losing. We have to keep learning, and our tools and AI and machine learning, it's only a tool. It's not a solution. It's not it's not the salvation for us all. It's just a tool to react faster, to adapt more quickly, and try to at least learn as quickly as the fraudsters do. They will be always a little bit faster than us, but at least let's give them as little time ahead as possible.
Yeah, for sure. David, I've seen you nodding emphatically throughout that whole thing. And at the top of this, you obviously talked a lot about some of the AI capabilities that Visa are coming up with. What's your take on all of this?
Yeah, so we're obviously hitting on all of the key points, and I think one of the things that really resonates with me in terms of where we are, particularly from a risk perspective today, when we think about the real-time payment space or just payments in general, it's important to also remember that as Monica and Asoka hit on, so the payment lifecycle does not begin at the time that the consumer, the merchant, or who the payer actually wants to commit to the payment. It starts well before that, right? It starts with that initial onboarding. It starts with their normalized activity. It starts with that authentication, moving into the authorization, and then even into the follow-on payer, payee histories. I mean, when we talk about the impact of artificial intelligence, particularly as we step into sort of the fraud uses later on today's discussion, it's also important to note that we can use all of that also to the benefit of securing the customer so that you're not really creating any more friction that's going to impact that customer experience. But at the same time, you're providing those layers of security so that by the time that actual payment goes out and is submitted, even if it is real time, you've already gone through a number of layers of security to at least reduce the risk as much as you possibly can. And so as we're looking at employing and deploying AI capabilities, whether it's large language models, generative AI, I'm sure we'll talk about that today, or just deep learning or any other logic-based models that are being used today or have been used for many decades, the honest answer is that data is available, particularly on the processing side, to understand and how to reduce that risk throughout the overall customer lifecycle so that by the time that decision is being made, even if the fraudster is utilizing wide data sets that may encompass compromised data, you're at least at or ahead of where the fraudster is in terms of informing that decision and committing to that fraudulent payment. So the bottom line is, I think as we look at that customer demand in this space, as we look at how we can secure payments across multiple rails in that seamless, frictionless way, we have to deploy capabilities. There's not going to be one panacea. There's not going to be one model that sort of reduces all of the risk and mitigates all of the fraud. We have to look at it as we would through a normal cybersecurity lens, right? You have layers of security from your perimeter all the way in to the core systems. You need to have those perimeters aligned, and we do the same in payment space. And that's really how we're looking at the multiple layers of deploying our capabilities globally at Visa.
Yeah, and I feel like we talk about layers a lot, but it often gets overlooked when it comes to digital services and all these brand new propositions and innovation that actually humans also play a really important part. And we need to ensure that when someone needs to speak to a human or when a human needs to intervene, we're enabling that as much as we're enabling all of these new and innovative models on top of that. Because I think without that holistic picture, we're not going to serve customers effectively if we think that they can all be chalked up to some algorithm, because we can't expect with our human customers who are victims, never mind our customers who are fraudsters. And Monica, just to wrap us up, how do you think financial institutions can leverage AI to stay ahead of some of those emerging fraud tactics and schemes? Because I know you're obviously working on multiple use cases also in multiple roles as an organization.
Yeah, I think the magic question is to stay ahead. I think it's like how do we stay at par, at least, is the ambition. I mean, like we've been using machine learning, which is a subset of AI, for a long time, since 2016, and building on the model. So as Silke said, it's all about learning faster, and now injecting, of course, artificial intelligence so that we can really learn even faster, get all of the, let's say, schemes, so we understand what is going on so that we can react faster. And of course, I think one of the key initiatives that I think that we should be much better, and I think here the schemes also play a big role, is to learn from each other, like learn faster in a way that we can adapt and implement those learning into our tools. As Silke mentioned, AI is a good tool because it learns fast and it can see stuff the human eye can't see. So those are the things that we should work much more together in Europe to make sure that we can really let's say, protect us, the people, because we are the stupid ones. We are the ones that do the problems, and we are the ones that open up the doors we shouldn't. So how do we educate us to understand how to protect the money flows?
As I have a little bit controversial advice as well, if I may, especially coming from real estate compliance. But it's say goodbye to the perfect model. I mean, that's really, if I can recommend one thing to all the financial institutions out there, say goodbye to the perfect model. It doesn't, or if it exists, you will ask your data engineers to build you a PhD in ML and AI, but you never will get something that prevents any fraud or is doing yourself any good. You have to accept the trade-off between preventing fraud and false positives. And then you just have to figure out for yourself where, for your company, what's your risk appetite? What is your, how much friction, how many declined payments can I allow without our customer experience being unacceptable, right? So you really have to also there, as I said, queen of balance, which is funny because if you see me balancing in yoga, you will laugh, but I'm the queen of balance all the time in theory. It's really this setting here as well. So say goodbye to the perfect model and embrace that there is data thrift. Both customers change behavior, fraudsters change behavior. So you have to also embrace that you always need several models trained at the same time, basically competing against each other and setting a new product in production. That's a routine. It can't be rocket science. It can't be operation where you need to take down something in 4 hours or whatever. You have to constantly, you have almost be prepared to launch, especially in learning periods, where, like when we opened up for cross-border, I think we launched new models almost like every second week. It has to be normal. It's not something special you're doing.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's exactly what we're going to pick up on after the break. So we'll take a pause here. But coming up, we look to the future, how Scandinavia can lead the space and what the rest of Europe can do to catch up. We'll be back after this quick break, so don't go anywhere.
Visa's FinTech Fast Track program is streamlining the onboarding process for fintechs, enabling them to gain access to Visa's powerful capabilities and network. Visa and their enablement partners help fintechs launch and scale cards, virtual credentials, and disbursement programs. To learn more, visit partner.visa.com.
Welcome back to Fintech Insider Focus, where we're taking a close look at the implementation of AI to prevent fraud and the necessity of partnerships across the region to achieve this. So when we left, Silke, you were talking about some of the challenges and actually how financial institutions need to just get with the program and realize we have to be pragmatic over perfect sometimes to run for innovation. So let's talk about some of the other main challenges that are facing financial institutions when it comes to implementing these AI-driven solutions or any solutions really. So how important is data quality for this to work effectively? Because I know we've talked about, creating multiple models, but let's talk about the data that sits underneath this. And David, I'd like maybe to start with you on this one.
Data quality is at the center of all of this, really, because I think there's a couple factors on why data quality really drives the integrity of our models, the resilience of our models, and ultimately any scores or decisioning that those models are informing. I mean, the underlying data is going to be driving any evaluation that a model is looking for, particularly on the risk side, where we're looking for anomalies, where we're looking for suspicious activity of any sort, or we're looking for some activity that requires what we would generally call step-up type decisioning. That data is informed not only, let's say, from a Visa perspective by Visa and what we're seeing globally, but it's also informed by all the partners, any other data that we're ingesting or that's being made available as part of that overall life cycle. So when you think about authentication data, all the data inputs that are coming into that are going to inform whether or not there's an anomaly for that customer in terms of where they're trying to authenticate, on what device they're trying to authenticate. Is it anomalous? The underlying data that's being passed back and forth in the ecosystem has to be, first of all, there has to be integrity built into it, right? We have to understand and trust the data that's coming across. It has to be complete or as complete as possible. And we have to understand and our models have to adjust when it is incomplete. And from a scheme perspective at Visa, what we really endeavor to do is across the overall landscape is we're also here to help drive and inform what data really is integral to that decisioning as part of that overall life cycle. So this is where you even come back to things as road as like Visa rules and how important they play, because it at least sets a framework by which all of us within the ecosystem, within the four-party model where you have the merchant, acquirer, issuer, cardholder, customer, within that broader network, where there's an expectation of what data is going to be made available to the counterparty as part of that overall decisioning. And really is the underlying network across the board. And I'd be keen to obviously hear from Monica in this space, but really we're also positioned here to ensure that that data is making its way through and that any decisioning that's informing that data that's going into our models is adjusting to whatever that data is that's coming across. But data quality is absolutely integral to all of the decisioning, all of the rules, all of the AI that we're developing on top of it. So we spend a lot of time focused on data integrity in all of the development that we have. And as Soke noted earlier, there's a lot of development happening very quickly, particularly in the space of AI today.
Yeah. And I definitely think when we think about innovation when it comes to AI, we're always so focused on the models and how we create new models and how they can compete. But actually, we need to start with the data that we have on customers. And that boils down to identity and how we define customers and then what we collect on them, and how in this world where people are constantly asking for customers' data for reasons that they don't really see, how do we remain transparent and ethical, but also functional? So, Monica, I think it is a really nice point to segue over to you. From a services perspective, where do you see data quality fitting in and also innovation in the data quality space?
Well, as David said, data is in the heart, and I think for us, I'm happy, more happy today when we are also an issuer ourselves that we are actually allowed to store and process. So as a processor, we get all the real-time data from transactions, but now as an issuer ourselves, also starting to get the onboarding data. And there we can see better quality because we control more of the process. So the more we control, the better quality data we get, the better quality data we get, the better decision we can take. And of course, it's very product based, depending on are you issuing in a prepaid, let's say, card with very strict limits versus a revolving credit card. It is, of course, different. What are the controls you do? What are the KYB, UB? I mean, like the world is full of abbreviation, but it's all about understanding who is allowed to use that product, how have they entered the product, and of course, how are money flowing? And I think that's of course looking at VIPs and mobile pay, it's a huge benefit for them as it's like this massive closed loop, and then Visa is like that times much bigger. But of course, how do you control the and understand all the accounts that the money comes to? Because I mean, there's a lot of places for fraud and fraudsters to enter, and in the end of the day, we need to protect the data, which is both the identity and, of course, the actual money.
For sure. And so if we're, we've talked about data quality, we've talked about those AI models in the first place. Now, generative AI, it's our new favorite buzzword on the scene. It presents a lot of opportunities, but also potentially some threats as well. So where do we see the threat from generative AI towards financial crime and fraud? Is it on one side, is it enhancing the fraudsters, or is it potentially our biggest weapon against protector against them? David, you were nodding there.
Yeah, the answer is yes. So I think without a doubt, and I don't want to just focus on generative AI, if that's okay, but let's start with the generative AI space. I think, the first thing to go back to is Soke's earlier point, which is the technology is moving at a pace today that we have not seen over the past decades in payments, right? Like we're moving at a very fast clip. And as a result, we, particularly on the risk side and in the business side, have to really be adjusting how we perceive risks in the space and adjust to those. And so, and just to give you sort of a sense of this, when some of the large language models that were first published and made publicly available, I think that was September 22, October 22, we saw that within about 6 months, there was already scalable generative AI models being used by fraudsters in the cybercrime underground. So you can actually, you can search for this. Some of those models enabled for example, phishing in any language that you wanted to. So if you wanted to localize your phishing attempts in a language that's a non-traditional, historically that would have been quite difficult if the fraudster didn't speak that language and wasn't able to rent a service that had local language services. Whereas now they can generate a pretty believable phishing email to target any specific population. And when you combine the availability of compromised data with the ability to conduct very localized campaigns from a phishing perspective, all of a sudden you can begin to evaluate the efficacy and see the efficacy of some of those phishing attempts going up, and subsequently you're seeing scams being driven from that. But then on top of that, the other factor that many of us in the technology space began to look at with particularly generative AI was code development and deployment. How can we speed up in our own firms code development and deployment? We looked at that at Visa, and we immediately looked at what code is being reused. How can we embed that code in any new AI deployments or technology deployments? And how can we evaluate where we can reduce time to deploy while maintaining sort of the sanctity of those deployments and all of the risk and security checks, while also looking at how can you redeploy those development capacity across your overall firm. But at the same time, those code advancements were also being utilized by fraudsters. So not only were they able to sort of target in local languages against targeted populations with phishing emails or SMS text or phishing, whatever it might have been, but we're also seeing that the underlying infrastructure, so malicious, so you think about malicious links, like do not click the malicious link, that can also be driven by now generative AI developing that fraudulent infrastructure, so command and control domains where the fraudsters host their malware. That can all be automated now. So now you're looking at specialized phishing attempts in local language that are scalable, that can, in effect, have the whole infrastructure, the cybercrime infrastructure, develop in an automated way, in a very quick way, to target your customers. And so you have to be moving and adjusting to the fact that every technology that's made available that's open source is open source for us on the technology side and used for, in effect, good. But at the same time, you also have some pretty advanced bad actors operating out there utilizing the same technologies to attempt to identify vulnerabilities in the good. So we have to be prepared and working at pace, if not faster, and thinking really how do we stay not just one step, but a couple of steps ahead of them, so that if something's identified, we're already sort of next generation.
Yeah. And Silke, you said just before the break, the fraudsters will always be a little bit faster than us, and AI is an opportunity for us to get a bit closer potentially as a tool. But actually,
they don't have compliance departments.
Yeah, well, but I actually think, the other side of this is collaboration between banks, regulators, technology providers, the fintechs, as well as the neobanks, to start to say, and also in this case, payments issuers, rails networks, to use these technologies as a collective as opposed to in isolation. And so how well do you think this is being done in the region right now? Because we've already said that Scandinavia is on the forefront of payments. Where do you see it when it comes to fraud prevention efforts?
I would say it works best on a national level. But what we see in the Nordics, they're all characterized by rather close, or banks are generally prepared to cooperate wherever it makes sense and it's regulatory, from a compliance perspective, allowed to cooperate. And for example, fraud prevention is one of the topics where you are able to cooperate. It's actually expected to exchange knowledge. There are all these forums like the Nordic Financial Cert and so on, where we exchange information, where we exchange also a new trend we see now. The fraudsters have also understood that AI is not the answer to everything. So they also understood now where to use AI, like for their phishing attacks, David said. But then they are not trying to actually do payments from the fake profiles. They just try to get information about you as a user, which they then are using when a person is calling you as the police, and then they know everything about you. Your social security number, your bank account number, is the last transaction you did, because they had access and checked that. So the whole credibility factor that the police is calling you is so much higher, right? So they also understood this, what we just talked about. It's just a tool. It's not the solution for everything. And that we are exchanging, talking about these trends, discussing those. I think that's extremely valuable. And it's one of the strengths of the finance industry in the Nordics, that we are able to cooperate. It's a little bit less on a cross-border setting. It's mainly domestically, as I said.
Yeah. And Monica, I can see you nodding. Do you see any other blockers to this apart from the fact that it's maybe too national?
Mindset. And I think mindset is always the AI is always the blocker. I mean, like the banks compete with each other, which is just stupid because that's not even true. I mean, like it's in the Nordics, 27 million people. Like it's not a competition. Like when something outside will come, and I think that's a problem. It is also very protectionistic. Remembering that we are different, like we have different culture, different backgrounds. Even though we are advanced in a lot of things, we are still pretty different. So the collaboration, as Silke said, national with the police, the security police, etc., works very well. But then across, which is even more funnier because the fact is that like the banks across the countries don't compete for the same customers because you are only a customer in the country you live in. Anyways, I think it's a mindset game. It's just like the C-level and the board needs to give more credit where credit is due, meaning to the chief risk side, because they are the ones that are protecting the revenues. Somehow it's like become this thinking that it's a burden, that compliance is a burden, but it's actually not. It's a game changer once it's deployed and given the let's say the appreciation it deserves, because it is not there to cause friction if it's not needed. It is there to protect the revenues. Then of course we can have some individual CROs going, weirdo. But in the big picture, and I'm not referring Silke to you, but in general, like I've been in banks, in multiple banks work. So like you get what you measure. Risk people are measured with zero risk. Zero risk is when you do nothing. And then the business is measured with other metrics. So I think it's a mindset and metric issue in the banking industry. And I think that needs to change. And when that changes, things will become even better.
I think it's an incredible point that Monica just made also, which is where we are, okay, Monica and myself, where we are in terms of, risks for business growth. I mean, you've seen a sea change in terms of how risk is generally perceived and utilized within their respective businesses, whether it's a bank, processor, technology firm. And indeed, I mean, if you just look at the baseline payment, when a customer, consumer experiences fraud, a single transaction of fraud, you see a significant reduction of transactions at a given merchant location. Transactions on that payment credential that's used by the consumer, they switch to a different payment credential. It changes and reduces their overall spent on a credential once they experience that. So, but we also see on the other hand, when you increase that security, which the consumers want today, which customers want today, it's one of the top priorities. You actually see increased payment volume, increased transaction volume, and it's because that trust, that element of trust is there. And actually, I think we're beginning to see, or we're experiencing that sea change where risk security is actually a driver for that growth and needs to be part of that conversation. As Monica just better articulated than I am right now, but it's an extremely important time from a risk and compliance perspective, because indeed you're seeing customers that are demanding that. They want that security, that trust.
Yeah. And I also think if we take a really cynical view on this, compliance is a revenue saver. If you are reducing the amount of fraud payments that you're experiencing, you're cutting down your operational costs, your losses from fraud, the increase in trust in customers. Like really, it's a smart business decision. But Silke, I imagine it's not as easy to make some of those points in rooms with the big banks where they're like, compliance who? Like, let's innovate, let's do something sexy with AI, right?
Yeah, and especially as risk and compliance very often are even two different teams, right? So we are not even agreeing that we combined risk and compliance and security in one team and Vipps Mobile is because we are not a bank. We are a fintech company, so we have some freedom there. But as you said, David, and also you, Monica, it's really, I mean, I always talk about the early bird. Our early bird approach, ask us early enough, no matter if it's security, risk, or compliance, and most likely you get a yes, but with some making sure the user simplicity and frictionless is there, but in a secure manner, not to lose the trust of the customers. Ask us too late, and either you get a no because something is simply not possible. I'm sorry, but doing payments in 2024 without strong customer authentication doesn't work that well. So anyone developing a product on that assumption will most likely get a no, or we will run into losses, lost trust. It's also a corporate social responsibility question in the end, right? So this really having a business-oriented compliance, risk and compliance function, who understands the complete value chain, who understands everything from your KYC processes to, we talk a lot about KYT, so know your transaction, what is making a transaction special, also knowing the receiver, of course, on the business side. So understanding where do we, because you might be able to accept a much higher risk when you accept a transaction if you really know your customers, or you might be able to accept a little bit higher, of course, not going below the regulatory requirements, but a higher customer identification risk. But then you need better security and monitoring later. You have to understand these trade-offs. Having some outsiders, and very often it is like that, compliance, especially coming in a little bit box ticking. Now I talk very bad about my peers, I'm sorry. But a little bit box ticking from the side when it's actually too late already. That just costs money and is causing a lot of frustration, because the easiest way to make Vipps MobilePay totally compliant is to throw out all 12 million customers not doing a single payment. I guarantee you, not a single fraudulent interaction, no money laundering, no terrorist financing. It's really, but business-wise, maybe
no
not
profit.
the best decision. No profit, yeah. But, but I'm not measured on profit, so see, that's
True. Yeah. Lovely. Well, we are just about at time, but we've got time for one last question, which I've been told to make quick fire. For the last one, I want to talk a little bit about the European environment. So how do we want the European real-time payments landscape to look like going forward, and how can AI help it get there? If you can possibly make it a one sentence, that's a challenge. But yeah, David, let's start with you. What do you think it'll look like?
So if I can make it in one sentence, I would say integrated, you're going to want to have interoperability between countries. We're going to have to expand the ability to look at that cross-border. And that's really one of the big focuses now at Visa right now, is how do you deploy those risk models, those capabilities, and indeed the rails, and provide those services on top of those rails across the whole region. So everything we sort of talked about today, bringing it all together, interoperability is going to be a key element.
Yeah, for sure. Silke, what about you?
I would say predictable from a regulatory perspective. And I think I mean exactly what you're also talking about, David. If we just could move into a new market and would know about open banking APIs, the PSD2 APIs and so on, that they're all following the same standard, that the interoperability is there, that there is a trustworthy EID solution at IDIS level 4 or 5, 4 or 3 in all the markets. So stuff like that, that would be my dream landscape to operate in.
Oh, brilliant. And Monica, wrap us up here.
Yeah, I think what Silke said, the magic word is trustworthy electronic identity. So us human beings going into the world of bits and bytes in a trustworthy way will then be very easy technically to build interoperability. But today, when we don't have it, like we don't have it, that is a massive problem, because that then makes all the difference when it comes to onboarding. Knowing who the person is, that would be the key. So transforming us. So I'm like, let's chip us at birth and then put that scanned into the electronic world, and we're good to go. Simple as that.
I'm really glad that we put a disclaimer at the top of this episode. No one should be chipped. And on
yes,
that,
everyone should be.
And on that lovely, slightly dystopian note, that wraps up today's discussion. Thank you so much for joining me. Would love to point the people to you if they want to find out a little bit more. Silke, would you start?
Yes, where to find us? It's just search for Vipps mobile pay in LinkedIn or whatever and reach out to us. So you will always, sooner or later, especially if you label it as a complaint, it always reach me.
For sure. What about you, Monica?
Yeah, Infuse.com and then LinkedIn with my name, and happy to connect.
Brilliant. And David?
I'd say you can find me on LinkedIn. That's pretty much it. And then in terms of where I would direct everybody, we do issue a biannual threats report. So you can go to usa.visa.com and access that biannual report there just to see what's coming over the next 6 months, peering around the corners. So check it out.
Brilliant. I'll be doing that after the show. And you can find me, I'm Rachel Pandyan, on LinkedIn or here at 11FS. Thank you so much for listening. If you like what you've heard, follow our podcast and don't forget to leave us a review. It helps us to make it better and helps others find the show. As always, if you want to join the conversation, find us on social media. Just search for 11FS or Fintech Insider or email podcasts@11fs.com. Thank you so much for listening and goodbye.